I never thought there would come a day when I would become the main character in a story that felt like a film filled with schemes, betrayal, and shocking revelations. From being an ordinary woman who once dreamed of a warm little family, I stepped into a marriage that seemed perfect, only to discover it was nothing more than a gilded cage where I was controlled, exploited, and slowly stripped of myself. People often say, marriage is the union of two souls, two lives. But for me, it became a battle of survival where love, money, and inheritance blended into a cruel game. I was turned into a test subject inside the very house that should have been my safest haven. I drank cups of tea-swallowed pills, never knowing they carried ruthless betrayal. I was forced to bear the weight of conditions and legacies that had nothing to do with me. And yet, perhaps it was from within that very betrayal that a new self was born. The woman who was once weak, who endured in silence just to please others, that woman died with the fear. In her place stood another Ava, resilient, stronger, and unafraid to rise and fight against those who once belittled me. This is not just the story of a broken marriage. It is a journey of awakening, of reclaiming my voice, of learning to place my own worth above everything else. And most importantly, it is the story of choosing myself even when the entire world turns away. If you have ever felt dismissed, belittled, or treated as if you held no value, I hope my story serves as a reminder you do not need anyone's validation to exist. You were enough from the very beginning. Chapter 1. The Beginning of Love. I still remember so clearly the first day I met Ethan. In fact, it all started quite by chance. One rainy afternoon at a small cafe in the city center, my friend Jake dragged a complete stranger over to my table and insisted on introducing him. Ava, this is Ethan. Trust me, you two will get along. You both like those foreign films no one else can sit through. I burst out laughing while Ethan, awkwardly holding his cup of coffee, stammered. Jake told me you're the only person in Seattle who's ever watched that 3-hour Russian film about a bread factory. I looked up, nearly choking back a laugh at the way he tried to look so serious. It's not about bread, I replied. It's a metaphor for the human condition. Ethan stared at me, then suddenly broke into laughter. Well then, at least we already have one thing in common. We're both equally crazy. And just like that, we began talking. Hour after hour passed. The cafe grew emptier. But we were still sitting there. He told me about his job at a marketing firm, about his dream of traveling to New Zealand, and about his obsession with crossword puzzles. He couldn't start his day without solving one. I told him about my work at a nonprofit, my fear of spiders, and my guilty pleasure of secretly watching trashy reality shows. As we got up to leave, Ethan admitted, honestly, I don't really like foreign films that much. I just wanted an excuse to talk to you. That honest confession caught me off guard. No pretending, no circling around the truth, just raw sincerity. And that was exactly what made me notice him from that day on. Half a year later, we'd become inseparable parts of each other's lives. Ethan often brought lunch to my office under the excuse of just passing by, even though his company was all the way across town. On weekends, we wandered around Seattle hunting for old bookstores and trying out restaurants nobody had ever heard of. He once said, what I love most about you is how you see magic in the little things. And I loved how he made everything feel simple, light, effortless. The proposal came during a camping trip at Olympic National Park. We were sitting by the lake as the sunset painted the water violet. Suddenly, Ethan dropped to one knee, his voice trembling. It might be too soon, but I can't imagine this life without you. Will you marry me? I looked at the vintage ring he held. It wasn't some flashy diamond, but an antique piece he'd found in a little shop, perfectly suited to my personality. I nodded through tears, and he lifted me, spinning me around beneath the forest trees, our laughter blending with the wind. The happiness of that moment was so pure, I thought I could live in it forever. Our wedding took place in my parents' garden. Nothing extravagant, nothing overdone, just family and a handful of close friends. I remember Rebecca, Ethan's younger sister, hugging me tightly and whispering, "Welcome to the family." Those words made me feel so warm then, as though I truly belonged. Our honeymoon in Tuscany was a dream come true. We rented a small villa, drank coffee on the balcony overlooking endless vineyards in the morning, and spent our days wandering through ancient villages. Ethan woke early to buy pastries, and coffee brought them back to bed, then asked where I wanted to go that day. He looked at me and whispered, "We'll have a lifetime to keep making memories like this." In that moment, I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. After all the scars left by my past relationship, I had finally found a love that felt safe, gentle. I truly believed marriage would be my place of peace. I had no idea that just a few months later, everything would turn in a completely different direction. Chapter 2: Dream Like Marriage. After the honeymoon, we returned to Seattle and began building our own little home. The small house with its charming garden quickly became our shared world. I loved planting clusters of flowers along the porch while Ethan busied himself with shelves, fixing pipes, always confident, saying, "I can do everything." The house wasn't anything extraordinary, but to me, it was a small paradise. Ethan always found ways to make everyday life feel special. Sometimes he would bring home a bouquet from the supermarket, simply because I thought they looked beautiful and figured you'd think so too. I still remember the day he came home with a bag full of white lilies, saying their fragrance reminded him of the first time we met at that cafe. I laughed, not because of the flowers themselves, but because of his small, sincere gesture of thoughtfulness. We even created our own tradition. Every Tuesday night was experimental cooking night. We would pick a random dish, often something we had eaten during a trip somewhere, and try to recreate it. Most of the results were disasters: burnt food, watery sauces, or meat so undercooked I didn't dare touch it. But none of that mattered, because by the end of the night we'd be eating takeout pizza, laughing until our stomachs hurt at our own clumsiness. On weekends, we allowed ourselves to be lazy. Saturday morning stretched into noon, the two of us still lying in bed, talking about nothing in particular. I would tell him about my bizarre dreams, and he would share office dramas or funny stories about his coworkers. Ethan had a habit of tracing abstract patterns on my arm with his finger whenever we lay still, and I often drifted to sleep in that feeling a sense of safety I had never known before. Despite his busy schedule, Ethan always made time for me. Some days he would suddenly show up at my office door with a lunchbox he'd made himself. Honestly, the food wasn't very good, but the fact that he traveled all that way just to bring me a meal was more than enough to move me. We also loved wandering around the city, strolling through old streets, ducking into tiny corner bookstores, or dining at little family-run restaurants with only a few wooden tables. I adored the way he was always eager to explore, as if every corner could be an adventure. "I love the way you see the world," he once told me. "You find beauty even in the most ordinary things." Hearing that I was certain I had found my true companion. Whenever we met friends or family, people would say we looked like something out of a fairy tale, and I felt the same. Everything seemed too perfect, so much so that at times I feared I might wake up from a dream. Sometimes I would sit staring at the glimmering wedding ring on my hand, wondering, is this happiness real? Will it last? But then Ethan would do something small, make me a cup of tea, wrap his arms around me in the kitchen, or kiss my forehead before bed, and all my doubts melted away. We often talked about the future, not in a pressured way, but more like sweet daydreams. Walking through a park, seeing children play, Ethan would whisper, "I hope our kids will have your smile." I would laugh and reply, "And they'll have your sense of humor, so their mother won't ever be bored." Conversations like that painted such a serene vision in my mind, a little family holidays, filled with children's laughter, trips together to faraway places. As time passed, I started to believe I was truly safe. After all the scars of my past relationship, I had finally found a life where I didn't have to force myself, where I didn't have to prove my worth. I had a man who loved me, a home to return to, and a bright future unfolding ahead. I thought this was the final destination. But I didn't know at the very moment I believed life had finally settled. The first cracks were already forming so small I failed to notice them. Chapter 3. The First Crack. In the 7th month after the wedding, I began noticing subtle changes in Ethan. At first, it was just his busyness. He often came home late, saying the company was entering its peak season. I believed him. Everyone goes through stressful periods at work. But gradually, late became a habit. He came home with tired eyes, shared less, and began dodging the kinds of conversations we used to be so eager to have. One morning, I noticed several parenting magazines on the coffee table. Pages were marked with pen sections, underlined crib models, high chairs, even lists of newborn essentials. I picked them up, a little surprised, and asked, "Why did you buy these?" Ethan glanced over and replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "To prepare, of course." When do you think we should start? That question made me freeze. In my mind, children were something for the future, a decision we would carefully discuss when we were ready. But clearly for Ethan, the future had already become right now. From that day on, he brought up children constantly. At the supermarket, he would point at the organic food aisle and say, "Our kids should eat this one day, it's healthier." On walks in the park, he would point at children playing on the slides and say, "I can't wait to bring our child here." I smiled to brush it off, but inside a quiet pressure began to build. Then one evening I walked into the study to find Ethan holding a measuring tape against the wall, his eyes gleaming with some plan. "What are you doing?" I asked. Without looking up, he replied, "Measuring to see where the crib would fit. This room would be perfect as a nursery." I froze. That room had always been our shared space where I wrote, read, where we both found a bit of solitude. And now Ethan had already decided it would become a baby's room. "But we haven't even talked about this," I said softly. He turned, looking at me with both surprise and impatience. "You're not ready. How long do you plan to wait? We're not getting any younger." At that time, I was only 28. I had never thought of myself as racing against time. Yet in Ethan's words, I heard the sharp edge of pressure, as if every day, every hour I delayed was a waste. In the weeks that followed, every conversation circled back to children. No matter if I brought up work friends or small personal plans, Ethan always redirected it to, "When are we having a baby?" His looks, the silence that followed whenever I deflected, made me feel as if I were failing some kind of unspoken test. One night at dinner, he suddenly said Mom asked if we might have fertility issues. I told her probably not, but honestly, don't you ever worry about it? I nearly dropped the spoon in my hand. Not because of the question itself, but because he had taken something so private and discussed it with his mother. My voice hardened. "We've only been married a year. Why are you in such a rush?" His answer was curt. "Because for me, a year is already long. We can't wait forever." I fell silent. I wanted children too, but only when both of us truly wanted it, when we were ready. I wanted it to come from love, not from comparison with other couples, and certainly not to satisfy someone else's expectations. Yet more and more I saw something shifting in Ethan's eyes. No longer admiration, no longer the gentle love I once felt from him, but calculation. He looked at me as though silently asking, "Can she give me what I want in time?" That night I lay awake for hours. The wedding ring on my hand suddenly felt unbearably heavy. I began to wonder, was the dream of a perfect marriage I once believed in already splintering piece by piece? Chapter 4, Family Interference. I once thought that if there was anyone in this world who would support and love us unconditionally, it had to be family. But one evening at my in-laws' house, I realized that sometimes it is precisely those closest to you who push you into a dead end. That evening, the family dinner unfolded as usual, with my mother-in-law, father-in-law, Ethan and Rebecca, his younger sister. We sat around the long table, surrounded by carefully prepared dishes. I tried to keep the atmosphere light, asking a few casual questions about work. But soon enough, the familiar question appeared again, this time, not as a gentle suggestion, but as blunt coercion. "Jennifer is pregnant with her third," my mother-in-law announced proudly. "Married only 3 years and already 3 children. What a blessing. I smiled and congratulated my sister-in-law, but then all eyes shifted toward me. Rebecca leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table, and asked outright, "And what about you, Ava? Do you two have any plans yet?" The room suddenly went silent, broken only by the faint clinking of cutlery. I took a deep breath and tried to respond gently. We're still figuring things out. Every couple has their own pace. My mother-in-law laughed a laugh that carried little warmth. Figuring out what, dear? You've been married almost a year. People have good news just months after the wedding. How long do you plan to wait? Her words pierced like a blade. I turned to Ethan, hoping he would speak up for me, explain that we needed more time, but he only sat there, nodding in agreement. Mom's not wrong. Maybe we've been too cautious. I went cold. In that instant, it felt like I had been betrayed on my own battlefield. I forced a smile, but inside, my heart was pounding wildly. Rebecca chimed in again, half joking, half serious. Women don't have much time, you know. You're not that young anymore, right? Her comment sent laughter rippling around the table. Everyone except me. I sat in silence, hands clenched tightly beneath the table to hide their trembling. I heard the clinking of glasses, the scrape of chairs, but everything blurred, as if I were drifting out of that room. After dinner, as we drove home, I tried to hold back my anger. In the car, I asked Ethan, "Didn't it bother you when they said those things? Didn't you see how humiliated I felt?" His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he sighed. "I know, but they're just concerned. Don't be so sensitive." Concerned, I let out a bitter laugh. Concerned, yet they make me feel like a machine whose only purpose is reproduction. Ethan stayed silent, and that silence hurt even more than the cruel words. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights blur past. A thought echoed inside me. Perhaps the happiness I was clinging to was only a thin coat of paint, one that could peel away at the slightest pressure from those called family. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. My mother-in-law's and Rebecca's words replayed like a poisonous refrain. People have good news within months. How long will you wait? Women don't have much time. Each phrase cut deeper into my pride, reducing me from a wife into nothing more than someone under scrutiny, someone being measured and judged. I began to realize this was no longer just Ethan's desire. This was collective pressure, an unspoken alliance between him and his family. And me. In their eyes, I wasn't an individual with dreams and feelings, but merely a vessel meant to produce an heir. It was the first time I felt that maybe I had stepped into a family that didn't truly welcome me, only what I could provide. And if I failed to deliver, would I even mean anything to them at all? Chapter 5. Unusual Concern. After that suffocating dinner at my in-laws, I thought things would eventually quiet down. But as it turned out, it was only the beginning. Rebecca, Ethan's younger sister, who had always been friendly, before suddenly became excessively concerned. One afternoon, Rebecca showed up at my house unannounced. She walked in with a bright smile and a bag filled with bottles of vitamins, boxes of tea, and odd-looking herbal powders. "Ava, you've been looking a bit tired lately," she said, placing the bag on the kitchen table. "I did some research. These are great for women. They help balance hormones, boost fertility. You should start taking them right away." I was a little startled. Rebecca had never cared so much about my health before. I picked up one of the bottles and skimmed the ingredients, but none of the names were familiar. "Where did you buy this?" I asked. Rebecca quickly replied, "A friend recommended it, very reputable. I've used it myself and felt so much healthier." "Trust me." I forced a smile to thank her, but inside unease stirred. I wasn't fond of consuming mysterious supplements of unclear origin. Yet Rebecca kept insisting, even placing her hand on my shoulder, her voice earnest. "You need to take better care of yourself, especially if you want children. I'm only doing this for you." From that day on, Rebecca constantly texted to ask if I had taken them, and every time we met, she brought me another box of tea or a new bottle of supplements. I began to feel cornered. Once, when I joked that I hadn't gotten used to them yet, her face suddenly hardened. "Ava, you can't neglect this. If you keep hesitating, you'll miss your chance." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Why was she so insistent? This wasn't even her business. It didn't stop at vitamins. Rebecca began scrutinizing everything I ate and drank. At family dinners, she would deliberately pile food into my bowl, constantly chirping, "This dish is good for fertility. You should eat more." I felt awkward, but to avoid conflict, I let it slide with a polite smile. But the more it happened, the more I realized there was something off about her concern. One time, Rebecca handed me a bag of herbal tea, claiming it was a special blend she had mixed herself. The tea was in an unmarked plastic bag, tied with a rubber band. My suspicion deepened. "Just trust me," she said, her eyes gleaming strangely as though she were guarding some secret. I started avoiding everything Rebecca gave me, but each time I refused, she grew visibly irritated. "You don't trust me, do you?" she once snapped in the kitchen, leaving me frozen in place. I brushed it off, claiming stomach problems as an excuse. Still inside, I began cataloging every word, every small action of hers. The peak came one evening at my in-laws' house. As everyone sat down for dinner, Rebecca brought out a tray of orange juice, setting a glass directly in front of me with a smile. "I made this especially for you, added some herbs that are great for your hormones." I stared at the glass, my hand hesitating. Rebecca's gaze locked onto me, watching, waiting to see if I would drink. Forcing a smile, I lifted the glass, touched it lightly to my lips, then set it back down. In that moment, I knew for certain her concern was not innocent. It carried an intention, something I couldn't yet name, but instinct told me I had to be careful. I began asking myself, why was Rebecca so deeply involved? Why did she seem to care about me getting pregnant even more than Ethan and I did? And if it truly was out of concern, then why did I feel fear instead of gratitude? At the time, I had no answers. But I knew one thing behind her unusual concern lay a secret. And soon enough, it would start to reveal itself. Chapter 6. Eavesdropping and the Explosion of Doubt. There are moments in life when a single, overheard sentence is enough to change everything. For me, that moment came on a Sunday afternoon inside my in-laws' house. That day, Ethan drove us over early to help prepare dinner. He went into the garage with his father to check on a few things while I went looking for the bathroom. As I walked down the empty hallway, I passed the kitchen, its door left slightly ajar. From inside, I heard a familiar voice. It was Rebecca. How much longer until she gives up? Rebecca's voice was low, but brimming with impatience. Another voice answered, lower, steadier. It was unmistakably my mother-in-law. "We must be patient. The doctor said the effects will be clearer after a few months. We just have to keep at it regularly." I froze. My heart began pounding my legs, rooted to the floor. "Keep at it, regularly." What were they talking about? Rebecca whispered again, but loud enough for me to catch. "I'm afraid Ava's starting to get suspicious. She's asking too many questions about the vitamins. If this drags on..." "Don't worry," my mother-in-law interrupted. "If needed, we'll add it to the food. She trusts us completely, and Ethan is far too busy to notice anything." My throat tightened. I pressed against the cold wall, struggling to keep my breath silent. My body trembled as though someone had poured ice water over me. Rebecca's voice came again, hurried and anxious. "But what if Ethan finds out? He'll never forgive us?" "He won't," my mother-in-law replied firmly. "All he'll see is that Ava isn't pregnant, and all his anger will fall on her. That's exactly what will make the plan succeed." The plan. The word hit me like lead. They were planning this deliberately, making sure I couldn't have children. Suddenly, all the pieces fell into place. The unmarked bags of tea, the strange vitamins, the constant pressure about babies, the scrutinizing looks from the family, the way Ethan's eyes increasingly carried disappointment. All of it finally made sense. I forced myself to stay calm, slowly backing away toward the front door, pretending as if I had just arrived. My legs shook, my hand gripped my purse like it was the only lifeline I had left. When I stepped into the living room, Rebecca was already seated on the couch, smiling sweetly, as though no conversation had ever happened. "Ava, you're here. I was just about to call you down to the kitchen to taste my new dish." I looked straight into her sparkling eyes, my heart racing wildly, but my lips stretched into a fake smile. "Oh, really?" "Maybe later." Throughout dinner, I couldn't taste a single thing. Rebecca kept piling food into my bowl cheerfully, saying, "Eat up, it's good for you." I nodded, picked up my chopsticks, but my throat locked tight. I stared at the piece of meat, and in my head only one thought repeated. What are they putting in this? I swallowed with dread. But inside I had already decided from this moment on I would never again let anyone else control what I ate or drank. That night back home, I lay in the dark beside Ethan, who was fast asleep. Silent tears streamed down my face, soaking into the pillow. I couldn't tell if I was crying more from betrayal or from the bone-deep fear that I was nothing but a pawn in some cruel game. But one thing was certain: if I did nothing, they would continue. And if I wanted to uncover the truth, I had to start finding proof myself. That was the moment my suspicion hardened into resolve. I swore I would uncover the evidence, and once I had it, no one would ever be able to deny what they had done to me. Chapter 7. Medical Verification. After overhearing that conversation in the kitchen, I could no longer sit still. I needed to know the truth. I needed concrete proof to confirm that what I had heard wasn't just some figment of my imagination. The very next morning, I called my regular clinic and requested a full checkup, hormonal and fertility tests. When I briefly explained my suspicion, the nurse sounded surprised, but quickly arranged an urgent appointment for me that same day. I remember my voice trembling as I said, "I think someone is deliberately interfering with my body." Sitting in the waiting room, my heart pounded so hard it felt audible. Never had I imagined I'd one day have to speak such words, but all the doubts had piled up into unbearable pressure, forcing me to face them. When Dr. Martinez walked in, her eyes were filled with concern. I told her about the strange teas and unmarked vitamins, and about the conversation I had overheard between Rebecca and my mother-in-law. She nodded, then said, "We'll run a full panel of blood and urine tests. If there's anything unusual in your system, we'll find it." The 3 days waiting for results were the longest of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I saw the bottles of vitamins Rebecca had given me, I wanted to throw them straight into the trash, but I held back, knowing I had to keep them as evidence. Ethan was still working late, oblivious to the storm I was enduring. When the phone finally rang, the clinic asking me to come in, my stomach sank. The nurse's words were brief. "The doctor would like to see you in person. There are results to discuss." Deep down, I already knew. In the consultation room, Dr. Martinez spoke slowly, deliberately. "Ava, your results show the presence of a synthetic substance in your blood. It's a hormone blocker, something that prevents ovulation and interferes with conception." I froze. My ears buzzed, the room suddenly hollow. I croaked out, "You mean someone has been putting this into my body and it can't appear by accident?" "That's right," she said firmly, looking straight into my eyes. "This isn't something that slips into regular food by chance. It only gets into your body if you ingest it through food, drink, or supplements. And the concentration in your blood indicates it has been administered consistently for months." The world collapsed around me. All the vague suspicions, all the fragments of unease crystallized into a horrifying truth. I had been systematically poisoned by those closest to me. I managed to whisper, nearly choking, "Is there a way to recover?" Dr. Martinez nodded. "We'll begin treatment. Your body will need a few months to flush this out completely. Your fertility can recover, but it will take time. What matters most now is caution. Only consume food and drink you've prepared yourself." I clutched the report in trembling hands, the paper crumpling under my grip. But beneath the panic, another emotion surged: determination. They might think I was weak, that I would accept my fate, but now I had medical proof, and I would not let this be buried. On the drive home, I pulled over into a parking lot, sitting motionless, staring at the envelope in my lap. Pain and fury battled inside me. I recalled every moment Rebecca had pressed tea into my hands, the glint in my mother-in-law's eye when she said, "Don't worry, she trusts us completely." Every word echoed, falling neatly into place, forming a grotesque picture. That night, I hid the results deep inside the small safe under our bed. Beside me, Ethan slept soundly. I wanted to shake him awake, to scream that his family had been poisoning his wife. But I held back, because deep down I knew he wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was exaggerating, or worse, he would side with them. No. If I wanted to expose everything, I needed more. I needed irrefutable evidence. And in that still silent night, I whispered a vow to myself: I will uncover the truth. I will gather every piece of proof. And when the day comes that I lay it all before them, not a single one of them will escape. Chapter 8. Ava becomes the investigator. Ever since I had the test results in my hands, I knew I couldn't let things stay in the dark. If it was only my word, Ethan would never believe me. But if I had evidence, images, audio documents, then the whole world would know the truth. I began turning my home into a crime scene under investigation. In a drawer, I installed a tiny camera pointing directly at the kitchen. Each time Rebecca came over, I noticed how she always lingered there, touching cups and glasses, opening the fridge, even saying, "Let me cook for you? Just sit and relax." I pretended to agree, but in my mind, I knew the camera was recording her every move. I also kept every bottle of vitamins and every packet of tea Rebecca gave me. Instead of throwing them away, I sealed them in zip bags, labeled them with dates, and sent them to a private laboratory for testing. When the staff received the samples, I remember their curious looks. "You think there's something suspicious in these?" I only nodded, saying nothing more, knowing the fewer people who knew, the safer it would be. From then on, I lived like two different people. By day, I acted normal around Ethan and his family, smiling as I accepted their harmless advice. But by night, I sat at my laptop, reviewing each video clip, replaying every secretly recorded call. Every time Rebecca asked, "Did you take your pills yet?" Every reminder, "Don't forget your evening tea." Each one became precious evidence. I even hired a private investigator because I needed to know their real motive. Why were they willing to destroy my health? Was it only about control? Or was there something more? When the investigator reported back, my hands shook with both rage and horror. Ethan's grandfather, who had left behind a massive estate, had written a very specific clause into his will. If Ethan had children, the inheritance would be divided among future generations. But if Ethan had no children, his portion would remain solely his undivided. And just months after our wedding, Rebecca had consulted an inheritance lawyer to ask about that very clause. There were receipts for the consultation, even written notes. Everything pointed to one chilling truth: they didn't want me to have children. Not out of concern for me, but because of money. If I had a child, Ethan's share would be split. If I never had one, the family kept it whole. I clutched the file the investigator gave me, my whole body cold. For years, they had projected the image of a successful, respectable family. But behind the polished smiles, they were willing to ruin me to protect their fortune. And that outsider they were so willing to destroy was me. One evening, Rebecca came over again, bringing her special herbal tea. I poured it into a cup, smiling. "You're so thoughtful, always looking out for me." But the moment her back was turned, I carefully poured it into a small glass vial I had prepared. I knew I needed as many samples as possible so the lab could compare. Inside, the fear was still there. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, living among those poisoning me while pretending to be naive. But alongside the fear, another force was growing stronger: determination. I no longer felt weak. I was in control. Late at night, I sat watching Ethan sleep, my heart tangled in 1,000 conflicting emotions. Did he know? Was he truly blind to what his family was doing to his wife? Or worse, did he know and choose silence because of what he stood to gain? I had no answer. But I knew. When the cards were laid on the table, the truth would be revealed. A week later, the private lab's results came back. Inside the vitamins and tea packets, they found the exact same hormone blocker in concentrations identical to those in my blood. Reading the report, my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. But along with the trembling came a spark of triumph. This was the weapon they couldn't deny. I carefully stored everything: files, videos, recordings, medical results inside a yellow folder. Holding it, I knew I was holding both my survival and my future. I was no longer the victim. I was the keeper of their secret. And one day I would bring it all into the light where they would have nowhere left to hide. Chapter 9. The Night of Revelation. I knew the time had come to end it. Everything I had gathered, medical reports, lab analyses, recordings, videos the investigators file, was sealed inside one thick envelope. It wasn't just a stack of papers. It was living proof, the key that would free me from this nightmare. I chose the Sunday family dinner at my in-laws' house as the stage. Dinner was always held in their lavish dining room, where everything was arranged to perfection: white tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, and the dishes Rebecca proudly claimed to have prepared herself. I wore a simple dress, no wedding ring, lips pressed in a quiet smile. When I stepped in, my mother-in-law called out, "Ava, you're here. You look wonderful. Rebecca made the roast you love." I replied lightly, "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." But inside I thought, this is the last time I will sit here in this role. Ethan pulled out my chair, still carrying his usual polished manners. I sat down, my hand resting lightly on the envelope inside my bag. During the meal, they chattered about Ethan's work, Rebecca's friends, little remarks about the neighbors. I chewed slowly, forcing small smiles, waiting for the right moment. It came when Ethan said I'd been looking at houses in Maple Ridge. Lots of good schools there. Perfect if we have kids someday. He said it without even glancing at me, as though having kids was already an unquestionable fact. I set my fork down, dabbed my lips with the napkin, and said quietly, "Speaking of the future, I have something I'd like to share." I pulled the yellow envelope from my bag, and placed it in front of Ethan. "You should see this." The room fell into silence. Ethan frowned, curiosity flickering as he opened the envelope. He pulled out the first page, a blood test result with the bold line, "Hormone blocker detected." His face paled. He turned to the next document, the lab analysis, confirming that the vitamins and teas Rebecca had given me contained the same substance. His hands trembled slightly. "What is this?" he whispered. Arms crossed, I looked directly into the eyes of everyone at the table. "This is proof that I've been poisoned for months. Someone in this family has been slipping hormone blockers into my body, preventing me from conceiving." Rebecca dropped her fork with a sharp clatter. My mother-in-law sat frozen, eyes wide. "Oh, that's ridiculous," Rebecca forced a shaky laugh. "What are you even talking about?" "Who would do that?" I arched a brow. "You want proof. Here are the private lab results." I pushed more documents to the center of the table. "And here recordings of you and your mother in the kitchen, whispering that if I started getting suspicious, you'd just put more into my food." Rebecca's face drained of color. Ethan turned to his mother, his voice breaking. Mom. "What is this?" My mother-in-law exhaled, struggling to remain composed. "Don't listen to her nonsense, Ethan. These papers could be faked. She's just imagining things." I let out a cold smile and pulled out another set of papers. "Oh, then what about this? The investigator's report shows that just 3 months after our wedding, Rebecca visited a lawyer to ask about your grandfather's will. It clearly states if you have children, the inheritance will be divided among future generations. But if you don't, you keep the entire share. Do you want me to read it out loud for everyone?" Ethan looked as though he'd been punched in the chest. His lips parted, stammering, I didn't know." I fixed my eyes on him, my voice bitter. "But you knew this, didn't you? You knew how much I was hurting every month. The pressure, the suspicion, the way you pushed me, and you chose to believe I was the problem instead of believing in me." Ethan lowered his head, the document slipping from his hands, unable to speak. The air in the room thickened silence heavy enough to hear the ticking of the wall clock. Then I pulled out the final sheet, a signed divorce petition. I laid it right in front of Ethan, and this is the end of it all. In that instant, the room erupted in chaos. Rebecca leapt to her feet, screaming, "No, you can't do this!" My mother-in-law whispered, horrified, "Oh my God!" And my father-in-law just sat in silence, hand pressed against his forehead. I meanwhile felt utterly calm, because for the first time in months, I was the one in control. Chapter 10. Confession and the Villain's Collapse. The room descended into chaos. After I laid the divorce papers on the table, Ethan hung his head in silence. My mother-in-law sat rigid like stone, while Rebecca, she could no longer stay still. The screech of a chair dragged harshly against the floor cut through the air as Rebecca shot to her feet. Her face flushed red, her hands trembling, but her voice was sharp and shrill. "You don't understand anything, Ava. You think you're so clever. These stupid papers don't mean anything. Everything I did was for this family, for Ethan's future. If you couldn't fulfill your role, then we had to take matters into our own hands." The room froze. I looked straight at her, my lips curling into a cold smile. "So you've finally admitted it, haven't you?" Rebecca bit her lip, but anger overpowered restraint. She jabbed a finger at me, her voice shaking yet fiercely resolute. "Yes, I gave you the vitamins, the herbal teas, even slipped things into your food. But I didn't harm you. It was all to make sure you didn't jeopardize this family's inheritance. Do you even know Grandpa left $15 million? If you had a child, that money would be split. Ethan needed to be protected, and I was the only one brave enough to do it." My mother-in-law leapt to her feet, panic in her voice. "Rebecca, stop talking right now." But it was too late. The confession spilled out like a flood, irreversible. Slowly, I pulled my phone from my bag. The screen, still glowing recording mode, had been running since the moment I sat down at the table. I raised my head, my voice steady. "Thank you. Everyone here heard it, and I've recorded every word." Rebecca froze, her face draining of color. Her lips trembled, as though she had just realized she had dug her own grave. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes brimming with pain and fury. He turned to his sister, then to his mother. What have you done?" "My mother-in-law," stammered Ethan. "I only wanted what's best for you." "What's best for me?" Ethan barked out a hollow laugh, a sound splitting like glass. "Poisoning my wife, turning her into a suspect, making her suffer day after day, that's what you call best. Do you even consider her family at all?" Rebecca choked on a sob, still trying to justify herself. "You don't understand. If Ava had a child, you would lose half the money. I did this to protect you, to protect us." I fixed my eyes on Ethan, my voice slow, deliberate. "She's right about one thing, Rebecca. He wouldn't have lost a thing. But you forgot I lost everything. My health, my trust, an entire marriage I once believed was built on happiness." The weight in the air thickened. My father-in-law, silent until now, finally spoke. He slammed his spoon down on the table, his voice trembling yet firm. "Enough! Rebecca, you have disgraced this family. And you," he turned to his wife, eyes filled with disappointment. "I never imagined you would conspire in something so vile." My mother-in-law collapsed back into her chair, drained of all strength. Rebecca broke into tears no longer, her usual crocodile tears, but the raw panic of someone cornered with no way out. Ethan staggered to his feet, turning to me, his voice hoarse. "Ava, I swear I didn't know. I doubted you, I blamed you, but I had no idea they were doing this." I looked at him, my heart twisting yet utterly unmoved. Once I had hoped he would be my protector, my anchor. But all he had done was watch in silence and let me shoulder the weight alone. He may not have conspired, but he had never stood by me either. I turned away, my voice sharp with finality. "No need to explain, Ethan. The moment you chose silence, you stood with them. Real love doesn't need excuses." I gathered the documents, slid them back into the envelope, and slung my bag over my shoulder. Each step I took across that room echoed like a verdict. Behind me, Rebecca sobbed, my mother-in-law trembled, and Ethan's voice called out, "Ava, please." But I didn't look back. That night, I walked out of their house as though walking out of a prison. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply, tasting the air of freedom. I knew the battle wasn't over. Rebecca would try to salvage herself, Ethan would beg, and that family might attempt to bury their sins. But the truth was out now, and they would never hold power over me again. Chapter 11. The Final Confrontation. I had just stepped out of that house, my breath still trembling from the rage I had held back for so long. The night air was cool, the sky stretched in a pale gray haze. I thought I had escaped, that I had left everything behind. But before I could reach the end of the driveway, I heard the door burst open, followed by hurried footsteps behind me. "Ava, wait, please." I turned. It was Ethan. The golden light from the dining room spilled behind him, illuminating his disheveled face. His hair was tousled tie hanging loose, and his eyes filled with desperation. "Ava, you have to believe me. I didn't know. Everything they did, I only found out tonight." I stood still, staring at him with empty eyes. A part of me wanted to believe, but reason reminded me he hadn't protected me. "You may not have known," I said slowly, "but you saw me change. You saw my exhaustion, my fear. And instead of asking what was wrong, you chose to believe the fault was mine. You even threatened to leave me if I couldn't give you a child." Ethan lowered his head. His voice hoarse. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I let Mom and Rebecca's pressure blind me. I wasn't strong enough to stand by you." I drew a deep breath, holding back the sob building in my chest. "Yes, you didn't stand by me, and that's something I can't forgive." Ethan stepped closer, reaching his hand out as if to touch me, but froze when I moved back. "Ava, I love you. I'll cut ties with them. I'll do anything. Just give me another chance." I let out a bitter laugh. There was no warmth left in it. "You love me. What kind of love stays silent when the whole world turns against your wife? What kind of love lets the woman you chose live in humiliation and doubt?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. I continued, my voice firm. "You're not as cruel as they are, but you are weak, and that weakness cost me everything. I can't live a lifetime beside a man who stays silent when I need him most." At that moment, I saw his shoulders collapse, as though the world itself had crumbled on him. But instead of pity, I felt relief. I had finally said what should have been said long ago. "I've already signed the papers," I reminded him, my tone calm. "In 60 days, it'll be over. You can keep the house, the furniture. I don't need anything except my freedom." Ethan took another step, his voice breaking with desperation. "You can't just walk away like this. We can start over. I promise I'll change." I looked at him for a long moment before shaking my head. "You will change, yes. But not because of me, because of this lesson. One day when you love another woman, you'll remember what happened with me, and you won't make the same mistake. But I will not be the one who pays for your growth." Tears shimmered in his eyes, but I no longer felt the urge to wipe them away. I turned, walking toward the car parked at the end of the driveway. Each step was heavy, yet steadier than ever before. Behind me, Ethan called out, "Ava, I love you. I really love you." I paused briefly, then looked back, my voice ringing clear into the night. "You loved the image of me you wanted, but you never truly loved the real me." With that, I opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw Ethan standing there, just a small broken figure in the glow of the dining room lights. Behind him loomed the house I had once called home, but now it was nothing more than a cage, and I had just broken free. As the car rolled forward, the wind rushed through the window, tossing my hair wildly. A surge of new energy coursed through my veins. For the first time, I wasn't a passive character in my own story. I was the one writing the ending. That night, I faced Ethan for the last time, and I chose to walk away to choose freedom. No more fear, no more pleading, no more waiting for recognition from anyone. I had found myself again, and that was what truly mattered. Chapter 12. Rebirth and a New Dawn. As the car carried me away from that house, I knew my life had changed forever. No more fake laughter, no more scrutinizing stares, no more pressure to be the perfect wife in the eyes of his family. There was only me, the open road ahead, and a vast sky stretching wide. That night, my first destination was my sister's house. When the car stopped at her gate, I saw the porch light already glowing. She stood there waiting, holding a bowl of hot soup in her hands. "Come in, Ava. You're safe now." I stepped into her arms, and for the first time in months, I broke down crying like a child. No more hiding, no more forced smiles. I could simply be myself, a woman scarred, but still strong enough to rise again. The very next day, I decided to start over. I found a small, bright apartment, 2 rooms, one for work, and one to welcome the people who truly loved me. When I signed the lease, a strange joy washed over me, as if I had just bought a ticket to step into a brand new life. In the days that followed, I decorated the apartment myself. I chose soft colors I loved, hung paintings not to please anyone else, but to remind me this was my world. I bought a small potted plant and placed it by the window, and every morning, as sunlight bathed its tender leaves, warmth bloomed in my heart. Work began to shift as well. I no longer shied away or feared responsibility. Instead, I volunteered for projects, guided new colleagues with patience and confidence. One day my boss told me, "Ava, I've never seen you this radiant." "You've found yourself again." I just smiled. Yes, I was finding myself again, the woman I thought I had lost, in those months of manipulation and poison. Time passed, and I realized that freedom was sweeter than anything. No one rushed me to have children. No one compared me to other women. I decided everything: what I ate, what I drank, whom I loved, how I lived. One evening, sitting in my new apartment, as the city glowed under a fiery sunset, I thought back to everything, the moment I discovered the truth at the clinic. The instant Rebecca lost control and confessed it all. Every tear, every ache, all of it had become my strength. Without those shadows, I would never have known just how powerful I could be. Ethan called a few times afterward. He left messages saying he had cut ties with his family, that he regretted everything. I read them, but I never replied. Not out of hatred, but because I knew our story was over. He had to live with that lesson, and me, I had to keep moving forward without looking back. As for Rebecca and my mother-in-law, scandal swallowed them whole. That confession wasn't only recorded by me, it had been overheard by several relatives. Word spread quickly. Those who once held their heads high in the community now walked with lowered gazes. But I didn't care anymore. That wasn't my war to fight. I had walked away, carrying what mattered most, my freedom and my dignity. One spring evening, as I watered the little plant, my sister asked Ava, "Do you think you'll ever love again?" I smiled, watching droplets glisten on the leaves. Maybe. But this time, I'll only love when I know I don't have to trade or prove anything. And if not, that's fine too. I'm already happy with myself. And that was the truth. I no longer felt empty in solitude. I no longer waited for someone else to save me. I was the one who saved myself. That night, I stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the starlit sky. The breeze ran through my hair, and I heard the steady rhythm of my heart, calm, no longer panicked. I whispered like a vow to myself. I was once treated like a tool, a condition to be met. But from today, I will live as a free human being. I will live fully for me. At dawn the next morning, when the first rays of light filled my apartment, I opened my eyes and smiled. One chapter had closed, and a new one had begun, the chapter of Ava Strong, proud and free. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew, no matter what came, I would never again let anyone take away my power. As I recount this entire journey, I still remember every detail vividly, from the condescending looks across the dinner table, the seemingly harmless cups of tea, to that explosive moment when Rebecca screamed out her confession. Every tear, every scar ultimately transformed into the strength that carried me to where I truly belong, freedom. Perhaps you'll ask me, do I regret walking away from that marriage? The answer is no. Because I didn't just walk away from a relationship, I walked out of a trap, a family willing to destroy me for money. I didn't lose anything. I reclaimed what had always been my peace, dignity, and the right to choose my own life. The day I signed the divorce papers, I no longer trembled with fear. It felt as though I had unlocked the door of the cage that had imprisoned me for so long. And as I drove away, the wind rushing through my hair, I knew I was no longer the old Ava. I was the Ava of the present, a confident, independent woman who no longer needed anyone to save her. I share this story not to seek pity. I share it so that anyone trapped in a toxic relationship may understand you have the right to say enough. You have the right to walk away. And sometimes leaving is not just the bravest act. It is also the sweetest revenge. This ending is not a collapse. It is a beginning. I have learned how to love myself, and that is the greatest lesson of all. If you are hearing these words, remember, this true love never comes with conditions. It never reduces you to a tool. And if someone cannot see your real worth, be strong enough to turn your back. Because in the end, the greatest victory in every revenge story is not watching the villains fall. It is seeing yourself still standing, smiling, and living a free life exactly as you deserve.